Victoria Ashford-Chen moved through the Riverside Commons like she owned it, which, given her tax bracket, wasn't entirely inaccurate. Her Lululemon ensemble, the limited edition Sage collection that had a 3-month waitlist, caught the afternoon light perfectly. The Hermes bag on her shoulder cost more than most people's monthly rent. She knew this, she'd earned it. Elliot, stay close, sweetheart. She kept one hand on her son's shoulder, the other clutching the weighted sensory toy he'd been using since their arrival. 7 years old, headphones secure over his ears. He moved with the careful deliberation of someone navigating an invisible obstacle course. Which Victoria supposed he was. The world assaulted him with stimuli that others filtered automatically. Brielle trailed behind, her clearance rack cardigan and sensible flats a contrast to Victoria's curated perfection. You sure this isn't too much for him? It's getting crowded. I've been managing Elliot's autism for 7 years. I think I know what he can handle. Victoria's voice carried the particular sharpness of someone who'd spent $40,000 on specialists and wouldn't be questioned by a public school teacher. Sister or not. The mall stretched before them. An outdoor plaza designed for people who wanted to feel European without the inconvenience of leaving Orange County. Fountains burbled between storefronts, holiday decorations, tasteful, not tacky, draped from designer facades. The air smelled of espresso and expensive candles and new leather. That's when Victoria noticed her. The girl stood outside the organic juice bar, holding a tray of sample cups. Black, maybe 17, wearing jeans so faded they were nearly white at the knees. Someone had patched them, careful stitches that spoke of necessity, not fashion. Her jacket, oversized and clearly thrifted, had the particular sheen of fabric worn smooth by too many washings. Scuffed sneakers, hair in natural twists pulled back with what looked like a rubber band from a newspaper. Victoria's hand tightened on her bag, not consciously, just instinct. The same instinct that made her glance toward the security guard near Nordstrom, confirming his position. The same instinct that made her shift slightly, placing herself more directly between Elliot and the girl. Free sample, the girl's voice was soft, professional. She held out the tray toward passing shoppers who mostly ignored her. Victoria guided Elliot past with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. The smile that said, I see you, I acknowledge your humanity, but let's maintain our respective spaces. They'd made it maybe 20 feet when Elliot's weighted toy, the custom-made one from that occupational therapist in Santa Monica, slipped from his fingers and skittered across the tile. Before Victoria could retrieve it, the girl was there. She bent down, and Victoria's entire body tensed. But the girl's hands moved with unexpected gentleness, fingers recognizing the toy's purpose. She picked it up carefully, examining the weighted beads inside the soft fabric. The specific texture chosen for tactile regulation. This is really nice, the girl said, turning toward them. The weight distribution is perfect. Victoria stepped forward, hand extended but body language closed. That won't be necessary. Her voice had the particular chill of someone being polite while communicating a boundary. She took the toy, not quite snatching but close, and immediately placed herself between the girl and Elliot. I was just, thank you, Victoria turned away, dismissing her with the finality of someone used to ending conversations on her terms. Brielle touched Victoria's arm. Vic, she was just helping, I know. I thanked her, Victoria's jaw tightened. Why was Brielle making this a thing? The girl had been hovering near Elliot. Anyone would have been cautious. This had nothing to do with, it was just common sense. Stranger danger. Protecting your child, that's what good mothers did. 50 feet away, the girl returned to her post. Her co-worker, another teenager in the same branded t-shirt, shook her head with a look that said, "Happens every time." The girl's face remained neutral, practiced. She'd absorbed dismissals like that before, knew how to let them roll off, while something inside quietly calcified. "You know," Victoria said, steering them toward Pottery Barn Kids. "We just launched a new diversity initiative at the company. Partnership with Oakland Unified, tech education for underserved communities." She needed Brielle to understand. She wasn't one of those people. She voted correctly, donated to the right causes. Her own husband was Chinese-American, for God's sake. Elliot made a small sound, touching his headphones. Victoria glanced down, adjusting them slightly. The noise-canceling ones, top of the line, $400. She'd learned every trigger, every accommodation. Morning routines calibrated to the minute. Sensory diet, precisely timed. Weighted blanket, compression vest, chewy necklace. Communication device, all the tools money could buy and research could find. She knew her son. She'd built her entire life around knowing him, managing him, keeping him regulated in a world that wasn't designed for brains like his. The holiday decorations caught Elliot's attention, projected snowflakes dancing across the building facades, synchronized to music Victoria could barely hear over the crowd noise. His eyes tracked the patterns with the intense focus he brought to things that interested him. "Pretty right, buddy," Victoria smiled. This was good. This was why they came, despite Brielle's concerns. Elliot needed to learn to navigate the world, not hide from it. They moved deeper into the mall. The crowds thickened. Music from competing stores created overlapping rhythms. Someone's perfume cut through the air, heavy and floral. The fountain's burble competed with conversation, laughter, the mechanical whir of the carousel near the food court. Elliot touched his headphones again, a small gesture, barely noticeable. "He's getting overwhelmed," Brielle said quietly. Victoria waved her off. "He's fine." "I know my son." The music hit first, competing sources layered into discord. A jazz quartet near the fountain, holiday pop from Nordstrom, bass-heavy hip-hop bleeding from the Apple Store. The sounds collided in the air, creating rhythms that didn't resolve, melodies that fought each other. Victoria barely noticed. She'd learned to filter environmental noise years ago. Elliot hadn't. His hand went to his headphones again. Not adjusting them this time, pressing them against his skull, trying to create more barrier between his brain and the world. "Look, buddy. The Christmas displays." Victoria pointed toward William Sonoma's window, where mechanical reindeer moved in jerky circles. Elliot's eyes tracked the movement for a moment, then slid away. His breathing had changed, shallow and quick. The perfume girl appeared from nowhere, spraying something floral and chemical into the air between stores. The scent hit like a wall. Elliot flinched, his whole body recoiling. "We should go," Brielle said. "We just got here." Victoria kept her voice light, cheerful. "One more store. I want to check the holiday bedding at Restoration Hardware. They have those weighted blankets on sale." A flash mob erupted near the fountain. 20 teenagers in matching elf costumes, speakers suddenly blaring Mariah Carey at window-rattling volume. The crowd surged forward, phones raised. Victoria felt bodies press close, too close. Someone's shopping bag caught her hip. A man's cologne mixed with the lingering perfume, creating something nauseating. Elliot made a sound, low in his throat, not words, distress given voice. Victoria crouched down, putting herself at his eye level. He wouldn't look at her. His gaze skittered away, fixing on nothing, everything. Hey, you're okay. Remember what Dr. Patterson taught us, deep breaths. He tore the headphones off. Just ripped them away and dropped them. They hit the tile with a crack. Elliot, no, those were $400. She caught herself, wrong focus. She reached for his communication device, the tablet with picture cards that let him express needs his voice couldn't form. He pushed it away, a sharp shove that sent it clattering. Victoria, Brielle's voice carried warning. I know my son, but her hands shook slightly as she pulled the weighted compression vest from her bag. 15 pounds of deep pressure therapy, recommended by 3 different occupational therapists. Elliot loved this vest. It helped him feel contained, safe, present in his body. She tried to slip it over his shoulders. He twisted away violently, his elbow catching her cheekbone. Stars burst in her vision. That's it, we are leaving. Brielle reached for Elliot's hand. No, Victoria blocked her. We can't just run every time it gets difficult. He needs to learn to cope with the real world. Look at him, Victoria looked. Really looked. Elliot's stimming had intensified, hands flapping rapidly, his whole body rocking. His mouth hung open, small sounds escaping. His eyes had gone wide and unfocused, pupils dilated. She'd seen this before, but usually at home where she could control the environment, dim the lights, eliminate the noise. Here there was no control. The flash mob finished to applause. Someone dropped a glass bottle. It shattered, the sound like a gunshot. The holiday lights shifted from steady white to flashing red and green, synchronized to music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Elliot dropped, just folded onto the mal floor, hands clamped over his ears, a high-pitched keen coming from somewhere deep inside him. The sound cut through every other noise, pure distress, animal and human at once. Victoria went down beside him. Baby, it's okay, Mommy's here. She tried to pull him into her lap. He fought her, his body rigid, then thrashing, his heel connected with her shin. Pain shot up her leg, but she didn't let go, couldn't let go. If she could just hold him, contain him, make him feel safe. The crowd formed a circle. Wide berth but watching, phones came out. Multiple phones held at arm's length, recording. Victoria saw herself reflected in a store window, designer athleisure now rumpled. Highlighted hair falling from its clip. Kneeling on dirty mal tile while her son screamed. Someone should call security, poor kid, can't she control him, the whispers carried. They always did. Victoria's throat tightened. Her expensive therapies played through her mind like a useless catalogue. Applied behavioral analysis, $12,000 this year. Speech therapy, $8,000. Occupational therapy, physical therapy, music therapy, special education advocate, autism consultant. She'd bought the best of everything, researched every intervention, implemented every protocol. None of it worked, not here, not now. Elliot's screaming intensified. His hands beat against the floor, against his own head. Victoria tried to stop him, tried to grab his wrists without restraining him, that impossible balance therapists preached. He was going to hurt himself. She was going to hurt him, trying to stop him from hurting himself. A security guard approached, young guy with uncomfortable eyes. Ma'am, we're going to need you to, I'm handling it, but she wasn't. Clearly, visibly, publicly wasn't. A woman in a manager's blazer appeared, her professionalism ablaze. Perhaps this environment isn't appropriate for your son. the words hit like a slap. Inappropriate, her son was inappropriate, her parenting was inappropriate. Her presence in this space, this upscale, carefully curated space, where everything was supposed to be beautiful and controlled, was inappropriate. Victoria felt tears on her face and couldn't remember when they'd started. Elliot's distress had become dangerous. He was hitting himself now, hard enough to leave marks. His keening had turned to choking sounds, like he couldn't get enough air. Please, Victoria didn't know who she was begging. The guard, the manager, God, anyone. Please, I don't know what to do. Brielle knelt beside her, hand on her shoulder. No I told you so, just presence. The crowd pressed closer, a wall of judgment and fascinated horror. Someone's child asked why that boy was being so bad. Someone's phone flashed, another photo for social media, another moment of someone else's crisis turned into content. Victoria wrapped herself around Elliot, trying to be the barrier between him and the world that was destroying him. Her control had shattered, every certainty had dissolved. The woman who solved problems with resources had no solution. Just a breaking child and her own breaking heart and the weight of every watching eye. A voice cut through the chaos, familiar, young, certain. I can help. Victoria looked up through tears. Keisha stood at the edge of the crowd, those gentle eyes seeing everything. Victoria's response came from some deep place of pride and fear and desperate, dying control. No, we're fine, I said we're fine. Victoria's voice cracked on the word, shrill and desperate, nothing fine about it. Keisha didn't step back. She stood at the edge of the circle of onlookers, hands visible and open. Her voice cutting through the chaos with unnerving calm. I work at Westside Community Center with autistic kids. I have a brother with autism, I know what he needs. The words hung in the air. Victoria's mind raced through calculations she didn't want to acknowledge. This girl. This teenager in thrift store clothes who she dismissed, feared, protected her son from. Now offering help while Elliot choked on his own distress, while strangers filmed. While security hovered. While her entire carefully constructed world disintegrated on cold tile. We don't need, Victoria started, but Elliot's head hit the ground again, hard enough that someone in the crowd gasped. Stop it, Vic. Brielle's voice was quiet, but it landed like a slap. Just stop. Let her help him. Victoria stared at her sister. Brielle, who never contradicted her. Who went along with the expensive therapists and the special diets and the intervention protocols that cost more than most people's rent. Brielle, whose eyes now held something Victoria had never seen there before. Disappointment, maybe disgust. You don't understand, Victoria tried again. Desperate to maintain some shred of control. Some justification for the fear that tasted like shame in her throat. I understand that your son is hurting himself and you're more worried about what people think than getting him help. Brielle's hands were shaking. I understand that you've spent 5 minutes refusing assistance from someone who knows what she's doing because she stopped. But the silence finished the sentence. Because she's black, because she's poor, because she doesn't fit the aesthetic of Victoria's carefully curated life. Movement at the crowd's edge. An older woman stepped forward, elegant in the way that comes from decades of expensive simplicity. White hair in a perfect silver bob, cashmere cardigan, pearls. She looked like she belonged on a museum board or a country club membership committee. Excuse me, her voice carried the kind of authority that made everyone turn. Even Elliot's keening quieted slightly, as if sound itself deferred to her. I'm Dorothy Hemmings. I was the director of special education for the district for 32 years. She looked at Keisha with clear recognition. Then at Victoria with something harder. This young woman knows what she's doing. Your son needs help now, not your pride. The words hit like a physical blow. Your pride, not your protection, not your careful consideration, not your understandable hesitation. Your pride. Victoria looked at Dorothy's face, at the expensive pearls, at the kind of credibility she herself had always possessed and wielded. The same credibility she'd denied Keisha, without a second thought. Dorothy was offering it now, lending her social capital to validate someone Victoria had already judged worthless. The irony was a knife in her chest. Elliot's breathing had turned ragged. His hands were red from hitting himself, a thin line of blood traced from where he'd bitten his lip. Victoria nodded, barely. A tiny dip of her chin, tears streaming down her face, unable to force words through the shame closing her throat. Keisha moved immediately, but not rushed. She approached from the side, staying in Elliot's peripheral vision. "Hey, buddy," she said, her voice low and rhythmic, almost musical. "I see you. I see it's too much right now. Everything's too loud, too bright, too much." "I get it." She didn't touch him yet. She positioned herself at his level, sitting cross-legged on the mall floor, without any concern for her worn jeans or the watching crowd. Her body language was open, non-threatening, patient. "My brother Marcus gets like this sometimes," she continued in that same steady rhythm. "When the world gets too big and too loud, and your body doesn't know what to do with all the feelings." Elliot's vocalizations shifted slightly. Still distressed, but something in his posture changed. Listening. "I'm going to help your body feel better, okay? Gonna give you some deep pressure. It might feel weird at first, but then it's gonna feel like a hug from the inside out." Keisha extended her hands slowly, telegraphing every movement. "I'm touching your shoulders now." Her hands settled on Elliot's shoulders with firm, even pressure. Not restraining, not grabbing. Steady, deep pressure that Victoria had watched therapists charge $200 an hour to provide. Keisha's thumbs found the exact points along his shoulder blades, pressing in with practiced precision. "Breathe with me," Keisha said, her own breathing audible and exaggerated. "In through your nose, out through your mouth, in, out." She began a gentle rocking motion, her whole body moving in rhythm. The pressure never wavered. Her voice maintained its steady, low cadence, almost a hum. She created a cocoon with her presence, blocking out the crowd, the lights. The overwhelming assault of the mall's sensory chaos. Victoria watched, frozen, watched as Elliot's breathing began to match Keisha's rhythm. Watched as the tension in his small body started to release, muscle by muscle. Watched as his hands unclenched, as his vocalizations quieted from distressed keening to soft, regulated sounds. Keisha shifted, wrapping her arms around Elliot from behind, applying deep pressure across his chest and back. "You're safe," she murmured. "You're okay, I've got you." The crowd had gone completely silent. No phones now, no whispered commentary, just collective held breath as they witnessed something unexpected. Something true. Elliot's breathing slowed, deepened, his muscles relaxed into Keisha's steady pressure. His eyes, which had been squeezed shut against the overwhelming input, opened. Unfocused at first, then gradually clearing, Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. This girl she'd feared, dismissed, protected her son from. This girl was reaching her son in ways Victoria's expensive therapists never had. with techniques she'd learned not in graduate programs, but in under-resourced community centers. With intuition born from loving her own brother without the cushion of wealth to distance her from his needs. Elliot made a soft sound, not distress, something else. His hand moved slowly, deliberately. He reached for Keisha's hand, made eye contact. Held it. Victoria watched her son connect with the girl she'd feared. And the last of her certainty shattered into something that felt like truth. The crowd remained still, holding its collective breath as Elliot's breathing continued to steady against Keisha's chest. She maintained the pressure, her movements slow and deliberate, like she was handling something precious and fragile. Deep pressure therapy, Keisha said quietly, her voice directed at Victoria, but her attention never leaving Elliot. But you have to apply it gradually, match it to his breathing rhythm. Too fast and it's overwhelming, too light and it doesn't register. You find the rhythm first, then you build the pressure around it. Victoria knelt closer, watching her son's face. His eyes were open now, calm, focused on something middle distance. Not the vacant stare of shutdown, but the peaceful gaze of someone finally feeling safe. Where did you learn this? Victoria's voice came out smaller than she intended. My brother Jamal. Keisha shifted slightly, adjusting her hold as Elliot relaxed further into her arms. He's 9, also autistic, and the community center where I volunteer. Westside Community Center, over on Palmer Street. Victoria knew the area, had driven past it with her doors locked. I learned from YouTube videos at first, Keisha continued, her tone matter of fact. Then from the other volunteers at Westside. Miss Chen there, she used to be an occupational therapist before she retired. She teaches us for free. We practice on each other, learn the pressure points, the rhythms. Trial and error, mostly. She paused, her hand moving in small circles on Elliot's back. Couldn't afford the fancy therapy programs. So we figured it out. Victoria felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd spent $17,000 last year on a sensory integration specialist who'd given her a binder full of protocols Elliot hated. The specialist had an office with a waterfall wall and a waiting room that smelled like lavender. She'd had credentials from prestigious universities. She'd never taught Victoria what this 17-year-old girl knew in her bones. Dorothy Hemmings moved closer, her elegant presence somehow making space in the tight circle around Elliot. Westside Community Center has a 90% success rate with behavioral regulation. She said, her voice carrying the weight of decades in education. They run on donations and volunteer hours. $5,000 annual budget for a program serving 200 families. I used to run special education for this district. I know their outcomes. They're remarkable. 5,000. Victoria heard herself repeat the number. She'd paid more than that for a single consultation with a behavioral specialist from Stanford, who'd observed Elliot for 2 hours and recommended applied behavioral analysis that made her son cry. Keisha was still talking, her voice a steady rhythm that seemed to keep Elliot anchored. The pressure has to communicate safety, not control, that's the difference. You're not restraining, you're containing. Like a hug that actually feels like a hug, not a trap. You're 17, Victoria said, the words tumbling out. You're 17, and you knew exactly what he needed. I'm his mother, and I made it worse. The admission hung in the air. Someone in the crowd shifted. A phone screen went dark. Victoria, Brielle's voice cut through, sharp and tired. She'd been silent since Dorothy's intervention, standing back with her arms crossed. I've been trying to tell you some of this for months, but you don't listen to me. You only listen to people you pay. Victoria turned to her sister, saw the frustration and hurt there. Bri, that's not, it is. Brielle stepped closer. I'm a special education teacher. I have a master's degree in developmental psychology. But every time I suggest something, you smile and nod, and then book another appointment with someone who charges $300 an hour. Because if it's not expensive, it can't be valuable. Right, the words landed like blows, true ones. Keisha's voice pulled Victoria's attention back. It's not about money, she said gently, still focused on Elliot. It's about seeing the person, not the disability. Jamal taught me that. He doesn't need to be fixed. He needs to be understood. There's a difference. Victoria's throat felt tight. She looked at her son, peaceful in the arms of this girl. This girl she'd, I was afraid of you. The confession came out barely above a whisper. When I first saw you, I clutched my bag. I pulled Elliot closer. I thought she couldn't finish, couldn't say it out loud. Say it, Dorothy's voice was firm, not unkind, but unyielding. You thought what? You can't change what you won't name. The mal sounds seemed very loud suddenly. Music from 3 different stores competing. The hum of conversation from the dispersing crowd. The click of heels on tile, all of it pressing in. I thought she was dangerous. Victoria forced the words out, each one like swallowing glass. Because of how she looked, where I assumed she came from. What I assumed about her. She looked at Keisha, really looked at her. I'm disgusting. Elliot made a soft sound, content, and reached for Keisha's hand. Held it, the gesture so simple, and trusting it made Victoria's chest ache. You're not the first, Keisha said quietly. She met Victoria's eyes, and there was no anger there, just a tired kind of knowing. Security follows me in stores, people cross the street, lock their car doors. I notice, a pause, but you can be different going forward. That's what matters. Can I? Victoria's voice broke. How do I even begin to? You start by listening, Brielle said. Actually listening, to people who know things you don't. Regardless of what they look like or what they cost. Dorothy shifted her weight. Her gaze moving between Victoria, still kneeling on the mal floor, and Keisha. Still holding Elliot with practiced care. The older woman's expression was unreadable, assessing. The question isn't whether you're sorry, Dorothy said, her tone measured and deliberate. Words are easy, feelings are easy. The question is, she paused, letting the moment stretch. What are you going to do about it? Victoria remained on her knees beside her now calm son. Surrounded by the wreckage of her certainty. And realized she didn't have an answer yet, 3 weeks later. Victoria sat in the back row of the Westside Community Center's main room. Watching Keisha guide a 6-year-old through a meltdown with the same steady competence she'd used on Elliot. The building smelled like industrial cleaner and coffee. Its floors scuffed linoleum instead of polished marble. Its walls decorated with construction paper art instead of commissioned installations. Nothing like the therapy centers Victoria had frequented. With their calming neutral palettes and expensive sensory equipment. Yet the kids here were thriving. The education hadn't been comfortable. Victoria had spent the first week reading everything she could find about implicit bias, each page a mirror she wanted to shatter. She'd forced herself through the discomfort of recognizing her own face in case studies about unconscious prejudice. She'd called Brielle and said the words that stuck in her throat. I need you to tell me every time I didn't listen. The conversation lasted 3 hours. It hurt like surgery without anesthesia. The second week, she'd visited this center for the first time. The director, Marcus Williams, had been gracious but not warm. He'd shown her the donated furniture held together with duct tape. The sensory room created with pool noodles and bedsheets because they couldn't afford proper equipment. The waiting list of 70 families who needed services they couldn't provide. "We serve the kids your world doesn't see," he'd said simply. "And we do it on a budget that wouldn't cover 1 month of your son's therapy." Victoria had watched Keisha work that day. Watched her move between 3 different children with varying needs. Adjusting her approach for each one. Using techniques Victoria recognized from expensive training manuals she'd purchased, but never fully understood. Keisha made it look intuitive, natural, like breathing. By the 3rd week, Victoria had drafted the press release herself, then deleted it and started over. Then deleted it again. The final version focused on the Westside Community Center's 15-year history of serving under-resourced families. Marcus's background in special education and community organizing. The measurable outcomes they achieved with almost no funding. Victoria's company's donation was mentioned in the 4th paragraph, a fact rather than a headline. The amount was substantial enough to fund operations for 2 years. Hire 3 full-time staff members and eliminate the waiting list. When Marcus called to thank her, she'd said, "I should have known about this place years ago." That's on me. Hiring Keisha had been more complicated. Victoria's current therapy team had objected strenuously. Dr. Patricia Holbrook, who charged $300 per hour, had actually used the phrase "unqualified teenager" in an email. Victoria had replied with Keisha's results. Her references from Marcus and the dozen families she'd helped. And a single question. "When was the last time Elliot stayed calm with you for more than 10 minutes? The silence was answer enough. Keisha now came to their home 3 times a week, paid consultant rates. And Elliot's meltdowns had decreased by 60%. The expensive therapists were learning from her, though some would never admit it. Victoria had used her professional network differently too. When the National Autism Conference sent her a speaking invitation, she declined and suggested Marcus instead. When he was initially rejected for not having the traditional credentials, she'd made calls. Used her influence. Made it clear that if Marcus wasn't on the program, several major sponsors would reconsider their involvement. He'd spoken to a packed room about community-based interventions. The video had been viewed 40,000 times. Last week, at a fundraiser in her own social circle, Victoria had heard a woman make a comment about those people while discussing a proposed affordable housing development. The old Victoria would have stayed silent, uncomfortable, but unwilling to cause a scene. The new Victoria had set down her champagne glass and said, "Clearly enough for others to hear, I used to say things like that. I was wrong, let me tell you why." The conversation that followed was excruciating. 2 people had left early, Victoria had stayed. "You're actually listening now," Brielle had told her last Sunday while they watched Elliot play in the backyard. "It's weird but good." They'd sat in silence for a moment, then Brielle had added, "It's not about being perfect. It's about being honest when you mess up." "And you will mess up," Victoria had nodded. Grateful for the permission to be imperfect, knowing she didn't deserve easy absolution. Now in the community center, Keisha finished with the 6-year-old and moved to where her brother Jamal was building an elaborate structure with foam blocks. She signed something to him, and he signed back, his face bright with concentration. 3 other children orbited nearby, and Keisha tracked them all with practiced awareness, ready to intervene or support as needed. Elliot sat near the block area, noise-cancelling headphones on, playing alongside a girl about his age. Not together exactly, but comfortable in proximity, regulated, happy. Using skills Keisha had taught him, techniques Victoria had finally learned to recognize and reinforce. Dorothy Hemmings stood near the window, observing as she always did. When Victoria caught her eye, the older woman gave a single nod. Not approval for Victoria's transformation, but acknowledgement of the work being done in this room. The work that had always been happening, invisible to people like Victoria, until crisis forced her to see. The narrator's voice cuts through, direct and challenging. This story shouldn't be the exception. How many Keishas are in your life, dismissed before they can speak? How many times have you clutched your bag? How many times have you assumed incompetence based on appearance, poverty, youth, race? How many times have you valued credentials over capability, polish over expertise? What are you going to do about it? Keisha continued teaching, her voice low and steady as she guided Jamal through a difficult transition. Victoria watched from the back row, learning, finally understanding that this was never her story to center. It was always Keisha's. The power had simply shifted to reflect what had always been true.